With a game franchise that's been around as long as Animal Crossing now has been, it's always interesting when main characters or villagers see some sort of dramatic change or shift in either their appearance, their personality, or in some cases even their names. I thought it'd be interesting if we looked at some of the really big ones and also some of the really odd and obscure changes that have happened over the years. Like for instance, there's the obvious ones like Tom Nook, who in Animal Forest had kanji on his apron, which stood for store, but then in like the GameCube versions of the game, it was updated to the leaf appearance that we kind of recognize him having on his apron. Now, of course, Tom Nook had other appearances in those early games based on what type of shop he had, but the base look was, of course, this one that we all know. But then later games, Tom Nook grew up a bit. He had a nice little sweater in Animal Crossing New Leaf, and then he had a more tropical business casual outfit, which fit in well to the New Horizons aesthetic, but also might have been a sign of the evolution of his character maturing, where he goes from a hardworking shop owner into a more professional business raccoon into a more laid-back profession that allows him to not have to work as hard, or at least he can kick back a little bit more from time to time. There's some random ones though that I always find really interesting, like the villager Alfonso, who in the old Animal Crossing games was known for wearing a Mario shirt, and a lot of people assume that this character was built as an homage to Mario, Nintendo's mascot. I don't know, I guess because he had an Italian name and, his shirt looked like this, it made sense to an extent. However, in newer games, in like Animal Crossing New Horizons, for example, Alfonso has finally retired the Mario shirt and has grown up into wearing just a red sweater. Still a small homage to the way his character once looked, but obviously departing from the Mario direct reference. Cube is another interesting one. Back in the day, obviously Ice Cube, Penguin, it all makes sense. He wore a GameCube shirt, which was an incredible, double meaning play on words here. Though, once again, another character who must have grown out of promoting Nintendo in a Nintendo game and now just kind of wears a different polka dot type shirt. Also, some other small things, of course, we'll notice with these villagers as they've changed over the years. The proportions changed a little bit, and sometimes that resulted in some dramatic changes, even though most villagers, of course, are going to look a little bit different than how they looked way back in the day versus now. Cube also, you can notice the coloration under his chin being different, his beak being more detailed, and the way that his belly looks under his shirt is more rounded off. I think Daisy's a really interesting Animal Crossing villager because back in the day, not only was she a fan favorite, but she kind of had this two-tone design going on with the off-white and then the blue ears and paws. Animal Crossing New Horizons did something really interesting with this character's redesign where they implemented a gradient into the coloration, so the color gradually changes from the off-white into the blue rather than just being direct color sections. Also, Derwin is interesting. This character was known for having his glasses, and originally in the older games, those glasses were hard baked onto his face. They were a part of his face, and he had these white backgrounds because of it. However, in New Horizons, when they kind of started doing more things with accessories for villagers, his eyes would become divorced from the glasses, and he actually has eyes behind the glasses and kind of a clearer coat instead of the white squares that he used to have for his eyes. Another example of villager proportions changing a bit, making things look a little bit better, would be Kiki, for example. In the old Animal Crossing days, just because of how rounded the cat's faces were, her nose looks enormous for a cat-looking villager. However, this would be refined and shaped a little bit better to the cat's head later on. Ozzy is another example. There's this whole weird nose that makes the whole entire face seems off. This almost looks like a jump scare monster ready to scare you. However, the proportions were fixed later on, and this character now looks a whole lot better. Velma is a goat, and she has a chin in later iterations of her design, but in the original one, her mouth just kind of runs to the bottom of her face. Jitters might be on drugs, but he has a new hairline in the newer games, which makes him a little more charming, I think. A little nice haircut can go a long way, and it works with Jitters. Or at least I guess he has more hair than before. Bella is another interesting one who had this diamond-shaped nose in the older games, but then had a more rounded nose in newer games to better shape the geometry of the character's head. I thought it was really interesting, actually, when I was doing research on this video, that Camo Frog, despite the fact that he has a generic camouflage design, hasn't actually changed all that much. The pattern of the camouflage has stayed consistent across every game. Now, to be fair, in later games, the design was cleaned up and rounded off a bit to better fit the reformed shape of the character's head, but for some reason I just assumed that Camo Frog would have a different camouflage pattern across different games, but no, they've actually made it a point to keep it somewhat consistent. Okay, Isabelle, not too much to really talk about. In the first Animal Crossing game, she looked like this, rocking a Pam Beasley type sweater, but then similarly to Tom Nook in Animal Crossing Crossing New Horizons, she has more of that like tropical island resort business casual type look. Harriet was a very surprising character to look at, who went through a dramatic transformation. In the older games like Animal Crossing City Folk, she looked like a regular like hair salon stylist, but we know that by New Horizons, she and Harv might have developed feelings for each other, and she just went full-on hippie and kind of rocks it. I think Harv and Harriet look good together. Okay, let's move on to everyone's favorite fruit-themed villager, I guess. Tangy. I mean, she's like a cat, but she's modeled after this tangerine. She really looked like she had these indents that you would find on the actual fruit themselves or itself. I don't know what tangy is. Nonetheless, over the years, these indents have kind of lessened and lessened throughout each game as graphics have improved, and now they look more like just freckles than back when her face actually looked like an orange golf ball. Ursula's another interesting one if you look at how she looked way in the beginning versus how she looks now. She used to have like a beige front to her face, but now it became more of like a palish yellow color. Also, back in the day, her mouth was borderline freakishly large, so this redesign was probably for the better. Valis is an interesting one. She only appeared in the Nintendo 64 and GameCube games, but here she and her baby were originally blue kangaroos, but in the Animal Crossing update that came later, they were both actually changed in color to being gray. Okay, this next one might sound a little bit crazy, but let's just bring it up just because. Vesta is a sheep that's always had a purple face, but randomly in this amiibo card, her face was misprinted to be black, probably like an ink printing error, but still kind of a yikes. I definitely don't think there was an ill intent though. Vic is another interesting villager. His ears seem to become more and more narrow over the years, where like now the pink part of the inside of his ear touches his head when it used to be like a separated coloration part in his ear. Okay, Vivian's interesting. She was introduced in Animal Forest E+, the Japanese exclusive like super version of Animal Crossing for the GameCube. And back in the day, she had this darker beige fur, and over the years it seems like the brightness has been turned up, and nowadays it's almost like a pastel yellow or something like that. In the N64 version of Animal Forest, Vladimir had these like terrifyingly tiny pupils, and it just made his whole face look, I don't know what this is. Fortunately, by the GameCube release, he got bigger pupils, his face was kind of like fixed up a bit, and he had some different coloration around his mouth, but man, this one was one that needed work, and I'm glad they gave it the attention that it needed. Okay, kind of a meme, not really, it's a meme. Wolf Link, now he's only in Animal Crossing New Leaf Welcome amiibo, and he's kind of like a special character, not even a real normal villager, never came back again. He does change his appearance from Twilight Princess though. I mean, besides the fact that he's like an anthropomorphic Animal Crossing character now. Little details were interesting, like he lost his earrings, which he normally had, and technically he should have a shackle on his leg, but I digress. This one's kind of just like a throwaway. Okay, Walt the kangaroo, he used to have this like white dot on his nose, but by New Horizons, his nose was definitely just like jet black now. He was supposed to like be a reflection or something to like make it look like it was a wet nose. I don't know. They definitely did away with it though. Okay, then we have everyone's favorite villager, Wart Jr. Now, he used to have very noticeable warts, on his face, and then over time, much like Tangy, got less detailed and now almost blend in with his skin, which does make him, a little more appealing to talk to than beforehand, where you just like feel gross just talking to him. Okay, guys, we need to sit down and have a discussion about Weber. Now, Weber used to have like half a bowl cut here in the original Animal Crossing games, both the N64 and the Western GameCube version, but then he also didn't really have hair in the back of his head, which he somehow grew his hair back there later on, and by the time Animal Crossing New Leaf released, he has a full round bowl cut, and ever since then, that's been the case. But you can see here, at one point, he didn't have the hair in the back, and then later on, they updated it, and he did get hair in the back. What was going on with Wendy back in the older games? Like, she had this watermelon scarf, not too much else on. Her wool, fur, I don't know what this is, was much puffier, and it seemed to be more of like a baby blue color than in the newer games. Her fur, wool, I don't know, are now closer down, and she wears a watermelon shirt, which I guess that's good. Maybe it's like Wendy, but Willow used to love scarves. Maybe not so much nowadays. And while we're not going to talk about the clothing changes of every single villager over the years, just some noticeable ones. Winnie was a horse that had a cow pattern shirt on in the original Animal Crossing games, but later on upgraded to a different style, a zebra print shirt, which is interesting. Similarly, Zell used to wear this Arctic camo tee, and then he graduated into this shirt instead, just something a little more classy, a little more with the hip times. Now, Ankha, on the other hand, is probably one of the most interesting characters when it does come to specific clothing changes, and not because of all of the fan support for this character. Yikes. That aside, Ankha is unique though, and her design, while different, doesn't actually change over the games as much as the clothing that she wears across every game. Now, Ankha first appeared on the GameCube version of Animal Crossing and Animal Forest, and back then she wasn't a normal villager. She was just one of these special villagers that could only be visited by going to the island through Cap'n. So, much like a couple of other villagers who started out as the special island characters, like Faith for example, the island characters were restricted to just wearing specific clothing that was like those tropical island clothes that you could get on that island. So boom, this was the first appearance of Ankha. However, when later games would release, Ankha would get promoted to being a normal villager and would no longer be restricted to wearing just those island clothings. While rest in peace, she did not get to make an appearance in Animal Crossing Wild World, she did show up by Animal Crossing City Folk, and this time around was wearing this like Egyptian themed outfit, I guess. And from there, this is one of the few villagers that has changed outfits multiple times over the course of their career in Animal Crossing. Because Ankha, after City Folk dressing up in this Egyptian outfit, would later change again by Animal Crossing New Leaf and also Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, wearing the mummy outfit, interestingly enough, almost looking like something that Lucky should be wearing, not necessarily Ankha. I always felt like this outfit choice was kind of out of place because very obviously, while it is Egyptian themed to do stuff with mummies, I feel like the cat appearance just was something different. It wasn't supposed to be like that. And I think they realized that by the time Animal Crossing New Horizons came out, because they chose to change Ankha's clothing one more time for the launch of that game. Where finally, in Animal Crossing New Horizons, her clothing was once again replaced to the Palladial tank dress, which I think kind of fits better into the whole like Egyptian Sphinx Cleopatra queen idea that Ankha is kind of based on. I don't know how good it was for maybe like the fan base and their inspirations, but for like a regular Animal Crossing player, this was good. For the most part with this video, we've focused in on the appearance of a lot of these villager changes, but there were some other dramatic changes that have happened over the years as well. Like for instance, Animal Crossing villager personalities changing. It's not very common when this happens, but it has happened enough times where we can talk about it and maybe note it. Just have a basic understanding, in the old Animal Crossing games, there were only 6 personalities. There were 3 male personalities and 3 female personalities, and after Animal Crossing New Leaf released and they did an update to add even more villagers, 2 new personality types were added, the smug male villager and the sisterly female villager personalities. And while typically there were a bunch of new characters introduced to fill in these personality types, in a few interesting cases, villagers that originally appeared way back in the GameCube or N64 era were resurrected after being not used in the Animal Crossing games for years into being brought back and then updated to have one of the newer personalities. Like for instance, Plucky was only in the GameCube Japanese versions of Animal Forest and actually was one of those original island dwelling villagers like Ankha was. So fast forward to the Welcome Amiibo update in Animal Crossing New Leaf, Plucky was one of the characters picked to be brought back. While she did get some fresh new clothes, her personality was also changed, where in the original Animal Crossing games, she had the peppy personality, you know, like that cheerful maglev Mike loving type of personality, but then she was changed for the new personality type and became a sisterly type villager, which is interesting because I feel like sisterly is almost like the polar opposite of a peppy type villager. So it is unique whenever we do see a lot of these characters that were switched from one personality type to another, and this was something that did happen quite a bit during this time period, and we can see a handful of OG villagers that were kind of left behind and forgotten about, resurrected for New Leaf just so they could take on the role of a new personality. So they're different, but also interesting. And while we do have these handfuls of fresh characters that were brought back with new personalities, then there's a couple in the group of villagers who've had their personality changed that are outliers, that weren't necessarily formulaic in the way the other ones were and had their own personalities shifted in a different form or manner. Rowan is a unique example here because he was in the original Animal Crossing games, and back in the day, he had the cranky personality type, which is, you know, pretty commonplace for male villagers. However, by Animal Crossing Wild World, this villager would be one of the few selected to have a new personality type associated with him as well, where he went from the cranky villager type to the jock personality type. It's definitely more uncommon to see a shift from a personality type that was already in a game to another personality type, but it has happened from time to time, like in Rowan's instance. And then the reverse happened with Harry, who looks terrifying, where he also was an islander who had the jock personality, but when he was reintroduced later on in Animal Crossing City Folk, he was updated to have the cranky personality, which is the exact opposite of what we just saw happen with Rowan. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe something in his personality just shifted and he became bitter towards the world. Maybe it had something to do with his awful beard. I don't know. Maybe it's because he didn't get to wear his cool island shirt anymore and had to change into his camo shirt. I give up. Okay, now we did talk a tiny bit about variation in villagers. Like, for instance, in the case of special villagers with Tom Nook, when he got a new store, he would change his outfit associated with the store. There's actually not that many other examples of this happening in game where characters have little tiny variations or redesigns, and it's really interesting when they do get one, especially like after the character has been established for years. I'm not talking like the difference between Digby with a jacket and Digby without a jacket. We're talking about a character that's been established for years, and then all of a sudden, bam, new version of the character, and they look a little different. KK Slider is a good example. For years, he was just like KK, and then boom, we had DJ KK in Animal Crossing New Leaf and New Horizons. It was a new look for him. Even though he still had his old look in the game, it was something different, because obviously you need to wear glasses if you're going to be a DJ, and you can't not wear glasses if you are DJing. And that's how we're supposed to tell them apart. That and the hat, because KK doesn't wear clothes. Do we talk about Gulliver and Gullivar here? I don't really still know if they're the same character or different characters. Lore-wise, apparently they could be different characters, but technically I guess it could just also be Gulliver just feeling like a pirate that day. And yeah, he does wear different clothes, and he does give you pirate-related items if you help him with his communicator parts. I guess the same thing could be said for other characters that we don't know for certain are different or not, like Cornimer. It's just Tortimer, but he wears the acorn mask for whatever reason. Okay, we've also spent some time talking about Lyle in the past, especially because in my 100 days of Animal Crossing Wild World, I got scammed by Lyle pretty bad. He just showed up, he demands you give him money, you can't like click away and get out of it. And the only way to really avoid it is just to not talk to him. He was kind of the worst, but he did end up turning his life around in later Animal Crossing games, and I guess you could make the argument that his appearance also has changed to reflect this. I mean, in the old games when he was a scammer and, you know, running all this mean stuff, he wore a brown suit, but then he pulls his life together. He gets a job at the Happy Home Academy and he upgrades to a nice red suit. So if you see Lyle in a red suit, you can trust him. If he's in this brown suit, he's probably gonna rob you. So you know that now. Okay, but then it gets even weirder, this rabbit hole of villagers that have changed over time, because there are 4 villagers who actually had their name changed across Animal Crossing games, and I think that that's really cool. But in the original Animal Crossing first generation games, there was this squirrel villager who had the name Sally. Now this character would leave after the first game series and wouldn't return until later on. And then there was another squirrel villager introduced in the original Animal Crossing game known as Hazel, which is this villager. Okay, so we have Hazel and we have Sally. Okay, but then things get really messy here, because in Animal Crossing New Leaf, a brand new villager was introduced, also named Hazel, and it was a squirrel and looked like this. So you can see there's a problem here. We have now 2 Hazels and a Sally who hasn't been used in the Animal Crossing games in a while. So the localization team just said, hey, well, we haven't used Sally in a while. Let's just go ahead and take Sally and give it to the old Hazel, and then the new Hazel can keep the Hazel name. So after that, Hazel became Sally, and the other Hazel got to stay Hazel. And then this forgotten villager was just to be, you know, forgotten about. But then things got more complicated when Nintendo decided, actually, we're bringing that other squirrel back as well for the first time in New Leaf. So then the localization team now add Sally's. So they decided to go ahead and rename the other Sally, this time to Callie. So essentially we've had 2 squirrels that change their names in the course of like pre-production of one game. All because they introduced a new character with an existing name, and the localization team had to kind of dance their way around all that. Oh, but the squirrel confusion doesn't just stop there. This is another early Animal Crossing character from Gen 1, which in the West was named Bliss, but for whatever reason, by the time Animal Crossing Wild World released, the character's name was relocalized again and changed to match its counterpart with the name Caroline, and her new name has been the name that she's gone by ever since. Okay, then personally, I don't think this next one should count as a name change, but it's listed in the websites that talk about characters that had name changes, like on Nookopedia. But Wart Jr., I guess in the first Animal Crossing game, they didn't have the punctuation after Junior, so it was just like Wart Jr., and they fixed that in later Animal Crossing games. I feel like this is more of just like a clerical error, but I guess it counts as a name change. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that one in the comments. Okay, and then another visual character change. We have Gracie Grace. Now, okay, this is what Gracie looked like back back in the day, and this is what Gracie looked like later on. Can you spot the difference? What's the difference between these versions? One of them has sunglasses. That's the evolution of Gracie there. Alrighty, what do you guys think about this video? Let me know in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed these Animal Crossing videos, maybe consider giving me a subscription. Like, just hit that button, try it out for a bit. If you change your mind later, you can unsubscribe. But I've enjoyed covering Animal Crossing, talking about Animal Crossing. You know, it's a weird landscape out here on YouTube to be an Animal Crossing content creator in 2023, almost 2024. But hey, you know what? We started only like a little over a year ago, and we are just chilling, and this has been cool. So we'll just keep going. Thanks so much for all the support. We'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video.